Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first live stream of Illustrado Dialogue. I'm Lelaine Benitez, Editor-in-Chief here at Illustrado, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different from what we usually do, during our live streams. We're going to jump into the messy pit of Philippine politics. Why? Because we believe that everybody has to have a voice. We believe that we can only understand each other if we talk. And we believe that things have gotten so toxic right now that nobody's really benefiting from all the ranting and trolling that goes on online. That's why today we're going to be talking. We have a panelist today who will be talking about President Duterte and his politics. Of course, we're representing both sides of the coin, and it's going to be a very interesting topic. I ask you guys to please participate. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, any opinion, just drop it in. And yeah, no trolling allowed. No foul language. This is the time when we can just sit down and talk about each other's differences in a bid to learn from each other. So let's talk.
Trying to find her.
Yes, shit.
We're so nervous, we're trying to deflect, and my earring just fell. I got so nervous because this is not the typical thing that we do in Illustrado, and we're just trying to break the ice, guys. And we're here with these three gentlemen who are trying to pretend that they're very serious, but they're not. But before I introduce them all, let me just thank first our venue sponsors, our very good friends and supporters here at the Dusit Thani Hotel in Dubai in Sheikh Zayed Road. We're here at the Dusit Suite, and they've been very kind to us, so thank you very much, Dusit. And now we introduce our panelists today, composed of both Duterte supporters and the opposition. We have Dr. Rex Bernard Bucara. Rex, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Rex. I am the Dean of General Education of the American College of Dubai. I am into technology, meaning to say that I usually incorporate technology in classroom engagement in the materials that I use. And I think Lalaine knows about this. I was a foreman Wong for many, many years since I came, 10 years ago I came to Dubai. And basically this is a new life for me, but I'm loving it.
Rex is a well-loved member of the Filipino community here, and he's a volunteer. He's had a lot of awards, so very well-known guy, Rex. Thank you for your service to the Filipino community. I feel like I should be handing an award to you today. On to my right here is Froilan Malik Jr. Froilan, please tell us about yourself.
Hello, my name is Froilan, and I'm a visiting scholar at Zayed University, and I specialize in migration governance and diplomacy in the Asia-Middle East migration corridor. So over the past 10 years, I've worked with a lot of governments, international organizations, including the ILO and IOM, and a variety of consulting companies that really focus on migration governance and employment. So I'm really happy that I've been invited here to share my perspectives in local politics in the Philippines, and I hope to offer some insights and some recommendations that we could possibly think about in the long run.
Definitely. I mean, if there's an enlightened member of our circle here, we will be, on your back to help you. I mean, to help us break down the things for the Filipino community. So, knowledge for the service of the Filipino people. And over here, he's been bashed. He's been trolled online. There's a meme out there about him. He's a world-renowned novelist. He's a writer. He's a teacher at the NYU in Abu Dhabi. Miguel Sihuko.
Yes, hi.
Please say hi to everybody.
Pleasure to be here. I'm Miguel. I teach literature and creative writing at NYU Abu Dhabi, but it's not just how to write, it's about how to use your words to empower yourself. I teach a course called Citizen Writer, where I teach just students from every background how to make their pens mightier than swords, and I teach another course called Novels That Change the World, because the idea is that words can actually have a very powerful effect on organizing and actually pushing for social change. I write for the New York Times as a contributing opinion writer. I'm a novelist. I wrote a novel called Illustrado, which charts 150 years of the failure of the elite in Philippine history. But recently I've been working with a Geneva-based NGO called the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, where I've been asked to be part of their steering committee of the Resilience Fund, which looks for initiatives in communities that are fighting against criminal abuses of power.
I know you're a big campaigner of democracy, and actually, to tell you the truth, this talk today was inspired by your project with Reverend Tet Gallardo, which is Usapang Atin, because lately we have been feeling very frustrated about the amount of mudslinging that goes on online. And even for me, I mean, I'm not a political commentator or anything, no expert on politics or anything. I represent the common, the ordinaryong Filipino out there, the kabayan out there who's looking for answers, who's looking for facts. So that's why we have put together this session, so that different opinions can be voiced out, and then maybe we can learn something from each other, right? So that's the whole point. So guys, again, we ask you, please participate. Please drop in your comments, share with us your opinion. You're going to be hearing from the Filipino community in a while also. And yeah, let's get to it, guys. 3 years in office, the president just had his sauna. And I know that a lot of people are saying that there are a lot of good things that are happening in the Philippines right now, but there's still a lot of concerns. One of the main things that I think is a very divisive point between the different sides of the Filipino community, for example, is the war on drugs. What do you make out of it? Rex, maybe you can say something. Oh, sorry. Perfect timing.
The war on drugs. I'm very much against it. At least I have to put it out there. I'm very much against it in the sense that at the very core of it, what I'm saying is I'm against killing other people. I believe in the preservation of life, and I believe in the fact that we need to preserve life as much as possible. I mean, being Catholic, and also that you just have to observe nature in the sense that everything is about being alive. A mother giving birth to children. You also have just look at nature, and it leads you to the point that everything has to be about preservation of life. Now, the problem about EJK is that I'm very much against it, but you also have to understand about the misinformation that is going around. I remember this clearly. Around 3 months after well, in 2016, okay, 3 months after, there was a report by, is it okay for me to mention
Yeah.
the newspaper?
Sure.
Not the newspaper, but the digital platform, Rappler, mentioned about around 7,000, being killed because of, it's something to do with HAK. And then, according to Rappler, the source is that of the PNP. And the PNP counteracted, saying that it wasn't around really 7,000, more than 7,000. It was actually just around 1,300, if I'm not mistaken, if my number is correct. And in this 1,300, you actually also have the other crimes, not HAK, but for example, there was an argument, something happened, all these homicide cases. So that for me is an example of a misinformation, because the fact is, Rappler mentioned that the information, the data came from PNP, and PNP said that we always give you the data every day, and you have to recant it because that is not the kind of information that we've given to you, but they didn't do anything about it.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Yes, Miguel.
I remember that. You're right. We need to be very responsible, and being responsible means that we need to be looking at the nuance of the situation. And sometimes it's very easy for us to look at statistics. But from that time that I remember that issue, and it was something like 1,800 or 3,000 confirmed kills officially from the PNP. But the rest were deaths under investigation.
true.
And so that's where the number came from.
Yeah.
So now, several years after, or not in many years actually, just 2 years later, we now have 8,000 confirmed deaths and 23,000 deaths under investigation. Okay, so that's what, 30,000 people who have died under the Duterte administration. And the 23,000 or something like that under investigation, who's that being investigated by? The police, right? What's the Senate investigation being conducted into the drug war? Who's managing that? General Bato. So it's very hard for us, I think, to really. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt with your train of thought.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that sometimes these numbers. You're right. We definitely need to be responsible in looking at them, but I think we actually need to analyze them a little bit and see the nuance and really question. What is it talaga? That's what you're saying.
That is true. My only concern to that is if you get the information coming from the PNP in that example, and you're saying that you got it from the PNP, then you just have to make sure that that is exactly the context of that number.
That's for sure.
See,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that we should only be dependent on the numbers given by the government offices. I'm not saying that, because probably there are independent agencies that can do that. What I'm saying is, if you're going to say that it comes from this particular agency, then you have better make sure that the correct context is there. Because if they're saying, the PNP is saying, at that time, they were saying it's around 7,000 plus the Rappler, and then you have the PNP saying that it's not entirely correct, it's around 1,300, then why do you have to twist the information? I'm not just saying that it has to do with that agency, other agencies as well. My point is, at least be truthful about what you report.
Sure.
Froilan, do you have any position on this?
Oh, of course, yeah. I think drug problems are global problems, and these are not quite common in the Philippines. And if you look at war on drugs, I share the same sentiment. A lot of it condemn these actually judicial killings and deaths, that you see on a day-to-day basis in the Philippines. And the president himself announced that it failed, and in fact, drug problems have become worsened.
He called it a fiasco.
Right, fiasco, right? And if you look at the numbers from Rappler as well, at least 20,000 deaths have occurred already from Human Rights Watch, a bit more, Amnesty International as well, and only 76 Filipinos were prosecuted. And if you look at drug-related crimes, there's roughly 10,000 such. Only 327 were solved. And what do I mean by solved? Solved meaning at least one person, suspect, was caught, and there was a case filed against them by the police. Now, the president said it failed, and if you look at global evidence or existing empirical evidence, that it actually doesn't work. One of the studies done by Columbia University even suggested that it actually doesn't work, and in fact, it prevents young people from reintegrating back to society. That war on drugs is a class issue, right? It's linked to economic deprivation, and it's making it difficult for a lot of Filipinos to even, recover. Now you have two options. You either take a draconian approach. The president took that. It's a hard line with that belief that Filipinos are difficult to discipline, right? In past administrations have failed or have limited efforts to address this issue. So you have a president now using a more tougher measure because we lack, in some cases, discipline to do that. And then you have this traditional approach, right? Rehabilitation, due process. So you have these competing methodologies because in principle, we all agree with the president, right, that we have to address these drug problems. I think the contention revolves around the methods and the techniques that we use. And if you ask me frankly, what do I think of it? Well, to be honest, I do think that 4 things need to be considered here. One, I do agree that we need to empower our local institutions to continuously enforce these, but with checks and balances. We are a country of laws and institutions. We come from that historical place where we defer to these institutions to protect us, right? From legal precarity, from a lot of vulnerabilities, from exploitative senior officials who are actually out there, right, to abuse us, or even corrupt officials. So checks and balances are very important. That is important, but also economic opportunities, because on a street level, kung wala kang pera, if you don't have money, if you don't have jobs, then what are you gonna do, right? You have to bring back this discourse at a street level, right? What do? What kind of food do you provide for your families? And even if you provide, rehabilitation programs, you do need these opportunities for people. And in fact, a lot of the NGO studies that actually came out, what they're saying is that many people return back to the use of drugs because of the lack of opportunities. And that is an issue. And the third thing is, if you're targeting consumers, then you also have to target producers, right? You need to target crop production of these drugs. Importation as well. Definitely. Not just in the Philippines, but also outside, because there's a lot of global importation. And lastly, I do think that we need to use more innovative technology and empower our intelligence a bit more to make sure that we actually are exhausting all creative measures, not just empowering local police officers and give them the license to kill. Because I do think I have some nuanced arguments with that. So I think creating that balanced approach, because if you're a president and you recognize that domestic problem, the domestic issue, it is an important issue for all of us. But at the same time, we need to exhaust all creative measures, not just that, but also linked it with economic opportunity. And lastly, I want to point this out. Lastly, this goes back to who we are as a nation, our national identity, right? We've fought and fought many of these wars, both at home and abroad. We kept going, and I think we need to make sure that whatever policies we have domestically, it should reflect the interests of the next generation. I think that's really, really important, and our image abroad too. So thank you.
Before I throw this to your side, and I like the way that this discussion is, shaping up, because we're talking about solutions, not just the problem, which is the whole point of, discussing. Let me just highlight this teachable moment to all the Filipinos out there. If you can see here, these people identify as pro-Duterte supporters, and yet they're voicing out their concerns. So it's never just a cut and dry deal. It's never really black and white, and it doesn't, that's why we shouldn't be labeling people. We should really just talk and see where everybody sits on the fence and find some solution. So now the question is, yes, we have a problem. The president says it's a fiasco. What do you want to see now in terms of change?
Can I respond to what you're saying
please,
now? Because to me it's not about throwing it to whichever side. I think we're all on the same side. We're all Filipinos who want the best for our country. We just disagree, which is our democratic right, on the best path to get there. That's all it is. That's what we do. We're Asia's oldest democracy, but it's become a democracy that's been perverted. I don't see it as a democracy. I see it as a dictatorship of dynasties, which predates Duterte, but for me has become worsened by his support for that. And that's one of the issues that I have with him. But I've never supported any candidate ever I've been a critic for all of them.
Mhm.
So I'm not anti-Duterte or whatever. I'm pro-reform. I'm pro-Filipino.
Mhm.
I believe in Filipino diaspora, especially
Mhm.
because during martial law, I was raised in Canada.
Mhm.
This was another thing that the Marcoses stole. They stole my childhood as a Filipino
Mhm.
and forced me to, and my family, to live abroad. And then as soon as he was ousted, I came back. But in the past few years, under Duterte, as a concerned citizen, I thought, okay, well, you know, am I just going to read the opinion pieces and whatever the memes and social
Mhm.
media, or am I going to go and see what's going on really with this drug war?
Mhm.
So what I did is I went into the communities, I went to the crime scenes, I went to the rehabilitation clinics, I talked to doctors, social workers, addicts, police officers, police chiefs.
Mhm.
I've tried very systematically to try to understand what really is happening on the street beyond all the information or disinformation online. And I always felt that if I, a Conyo kid from Forbes Park, can do it, every Filipino can do that
Mhm.
also. If they really wanted to go into the communities and find out what's
Yeah.
happening, they can go, and they should.
Yes.
And I invite everybody, I challenge everybody to do the same thing.
Get involved.
Yeah. What I found in studying a lot of this on the street level and also in the institutional level, I love what you say about we look to the institutions to protect us, but I also believe as citizens, we have to protect the institutions because we agree, all of us, that there are safeguards against abuses of power by the people who have the power. They are the one place we can turn to. And what I found, talking to members of the community, was that they had nowhere else to turn to. So I mean, it's very sexy for Duterte to say, 6 months, I'm going to fix the drug
Yeah.
war.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry, okay, 6 months, too short, I'm going to take a year. And then, you know, I mean, it's a campaign promise. That's all it is. Let's have no illusions. He is he's a politician.
Mhm.
He's a tropo. You know, his father was governor, his kids are part of a dynasty. He's just, to me, he's another one of all of these other politicians who I feel we should really keep in check
Mhm.
and force him to serve us. He's a public servant.
Mhm.
Anyway, I found that in these communities, this is a public health crisis, not a law and order issue. And Duterte came in saying that this is all about law and order.
Mhm.
And that played to our fears and also our frustrations at these broken institutions. Another one, I mean, I wrote about this in a piece called The Wrong Way to Fight a Drug War. But I also looked at another aspect that is very overlooked because it's not sexy, criminal justice reform. I have another piece called the injustice system. And so our lack of faith in the criminal justice system has led us to say, okay, you know what, we'll just kill those guys because our system doesn't work.
Mhm.
You know? So instead of our actually fixing the system, we're taking the easy way out. And Duterte is also doing the same thing. One of my big frustrations under him is that he hasn't done much at all to fix the criminal justice system, which would, you know, the penal system, the judiciary, and the police,
Mhm.
right? You fix all of those, then we can actually have faith in the system, then we can actually address this criminal justice, this public health issue, you know, because really drug addicts are among the most vulnerable. You know, this is an illness.
Mhm.
And according to Dr. Liabres in the Bikutan, the top rehabilitation clinic in the Philippines, you know, only 5 to 10% of addicts actually need these you know, very intensive rehabilitation. What we actually need are these community-based initiatives to help the
Mhm.
people who aren't.
Mhm.
But we haven't set up the system to do that. Instead, we have 10,000 bed facilities in, you know, that Duterte crows about. We have lack of information. The Dangerous Drugs Board says, you know, okay, actually it's only 1.8, and so Duterte fires him because he says, no, you know, it's 4 million. So, you know, there really is in this process a lack of accountability, transparency, and I believe also a lack of really focus on what needs to be done beyond the easy campaign promises and sound bites.
Okay. Rex, I can feel that you're, you know, you want to say something, but we'll take a break for now because we're going into our next topic. You'll have your say on that. Right now, we want to show you some of the, you know, community members that we have voicing out their opinions on the issues.
Yo, real talk, Darbs. My view on President Duterte is that he is not perfect. He has a lot of flaws, especially on how he addresses emotion through his speech. Well, some would say it's a sign of authenticity, but I'm not a fan of it. Pero despite the flaws, let's talk results. The Duterte administration is by far the only government that I was able to feel that there was actually a genuine change. Specifically doon sa passport renewal, wherein the efficiency of the staff, the one-stop shop of all the government entities, and the implementation of it is perfect. Now, still that doesn't mean that President Duterte is perfect. He has a lot of flaws. But I think he is doing what he thinks is right. His intent is good and it is genuinely for the country at para sa ikabubuti ng ating bansa. Now, whichever government it is, be it Duterte administration or not, there will still be a lot of people who would think that their success is being owed to them by the government. Ito real talk. If ever you have that kind of mentality, you're a loser. We make our own path and we can be successful whoever sits on top. So stop criticizing and start doing.
I'm an expatriate Filipino who has been living in the UAE for the past 15 years. To set the record straight, I love our country, but simply do not agree on how the incumbent administration is running the nation on the following points. The war on drugs. As per police records itself, it has resulted in thousands of deaths, EJK or not. And yet it did not end up with what Duterte had promised as the solution to the problem. It has only emboldened a culture of violence when it was supposed to help solve it. Both perpetrators and innocent civilians ended up as collateral damage in a war that nobody could win simply because it was the wrong approach. Number 2, on the issue of the West Philippine Sea, let me clarify, going to war with China was never suggested by the opposition or government critics. It was Duterte himself who kept harping the tune that if we go to war with China, we would easily be annihilated. All that we are saying is for the government to take a tougher stance anchored on a stronger diplomatic position and the favorable decision promulgated by the International Tribunal. There must be a clear boundary between enhancing bilateral trade and economic relations from territorial disputes for the world to clearly see who is using what against who. Number 3, this administration, while having public pronouncements against corruption, is supported by probably the most corrupt politicians and families in Philippine history. So how does one reconcile that? Number 4, rather than hearing expletives from the highest official of our country against those that criticize him, as the leader of the entire nation, I have yet to hear him reach out to those critics and ask them to help him in nation building. Thus, instead of bridging the gap of the Great Divide, this administration and its supporters have simply fanned the flames of further divisiveness. Number 5. Finally, I fully respect the opinions and insights of Duterte supporters, and I hope that the same respect be accorded to his critics rather than to muffle their voices and call them names. And yes, not all of this administration's critics are Dilawan. There are more colors to the rainbow than just yellow.
Hi, my name is Ray Delante and I am for the president. But may malaking pero kasi hindi ako sigurado sa mga tao under him. I think the big question here is the war on drugs, yung EJK, and human rights. Personally sa akin, it's an ongoing war. It's a good thing na merong ganun kasi marami talagang, I would say, nalinis. There are a few things na parang gusto kong sabihin, like for example, yung foreign policy ng presidente. There are variables around it na he's like careful about, baka kung ano mangyari. Parang yung dating niya, yung parang he's so for China. And then yung corruption, which I think he mentioned sa kanyang SONA, corruption is like isa sa mga malaking problema sa atin. Part na siya ng system. I don't think na we can get rid of it like that quick kasi it'll take years. At least ma-minimize man lang. Kung bibigyan ko ng score yung presidente natin, I would say siguro mga 8. I think because he is the right leader at the right time. May mga part na ayaw ko sa kanya. Kumbaga, generally just ignore the jokes. dig deeper dun sa mga importanteng bagay sa kanyang mga sinasabi, malalaman natin kung ano talaga intention niya para sa bansa. There's something positive going on, and I am for that. Again, my name is Ray Delante, and I am a supporter of our President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Maraming salamat po.
I am definitely not pro Duterte. Case in point, in the previous administration, my investments ROI would grow like 8, 15, 20% year on year. Right now, with the inflation of around 3 or 4%, and I was told by my financial advisor that even with my index funds and my mutual funds, I'll be lucky to even make 4% this year. So you could just imagine how much money I'm actually losing by just being in Manila. Or actually, I stand corrected. I'm losing so much money now just by putting my investments in the country. I used to work in Hong Kong and Singapore, and I've got to tell you, you'll be blown away with the returns of your investment there because it's such a banking country, and especially Singapore because the administration is not corrupt and they're encouraging business and they're encouraging investments and entrepreneurship. Sadly, yeah, I mean, right now with the kind of administration we have, this is just not gonna work.
I worked at DFA, kay Princesa for 3 years.
And I think we're
UAE
on
Government
now,
also did work.
and people can see the happiest mixed opinion group out here, because this is not typically how it is out there, and this just goes to show people that even if we are on different sides or we have different perspectives on the issue, we can actually talk to each other and enjoy each other's company.
But isn't it always like that anyway when we're not online?
Yeah.
If we're here having pulutan and San Miguel beer,
Exactly.
it's always like this, regardless of whatever the...
Definitely.
But I think the thing is, something like this, it needs more effort.
Yeah.
Because you need to inform the public.
Exactly.
And I think it is also our responsibility to give them numbers, statistics, and
Definitely.
well-informed
That's
opinion.
why.
When you have a group, ordinarily when you're having your beer,
Yeah.
etc., among many, with your group with the
Yeah.
others, it's just like what you remember and what you know at that moment.
But it's important to have the facts,
Precisely.
And again, going back to the discussion, it was very, very tough to get people actually to talk and, to put out their opinions out there in public. So I'd like to thank Albert Alba, Yasmin Basa, Darb Skim, and Ray Delante for sharing your opinion on the issues with the Philippine government. It's been very, very tough because I think most of the people who identify as opposition, they're afraid of getting bashed out there or getting trolled. So I do appreciate your bravery, guys, and we need more opportunities like this to talk and voice out what we're thinking about. And I'd like to say hi to Susan Villanueva, also Tess Keating. Hi Tess, all the way in Ireland. Chef Miko in Canada. Hi Chef. And Ben Lebig, Ryan Arbilos, all the way from Paris. Chef Andrew Paderes, Al Paris Manlangit, all the way from Kuwait. And of course, Albert Opena of Ounce is there. Thank you guys, and please do share your opinion, and we'll try our very best to, answer whatever questions you might have, right? And going back to the discussion earlier,
I was just about
Rex,
to interject something about what he said about giving opportunities, and I remember telling you this in one of our conversations about there was an experiment in Netherlands wherein I remember this now. There was this. I was watching TED Talk, around weeks ago, and there was this guy was saying, a former drug addict, and he was saying that we have to look at addiction in a different way, different mindset. And there was an experiment conducted in the Netherlands wherein you have that rat, in a closed environment, and apparently in that closed environment there was that drugged water, and every day this rat would actually go to that drugged water, would sip it, drink it, etc. And then they were saying that that might be the cause because you have the materials there, you have the drugged water there, so there is the only opportunity for that rat is basically to sip, to drink. The thing is, another doctor came in and then looked at the experiment, and the doctor said that there is something lacking to this. And what is lacking, you have the opportunities. And when we say opportunities, what do we mean by this? Now, what he did was basically put certain things, like a wheel, you have other, you have food there, and other things that the rat can go around and utilize. and enjoy. It's basically like rat heaven. Okay? So, so true enough, in this experiment, they realized that the rat would actually eat the other stuff, play around, but not experiment on the drugged water. So this is an example, okay, scientifically, that if given the proper facilities, then something can be done. And I do agree, okay, establishing, putting those rehabilitation centers, for me, it's not really the solution. You have to go into the before. What are we doing before?
Prevent them first.
Precisely, precisely. But look, while I did establish that in this sense, I'll just have to say something about, because what caught my attention earlier, you said that he hasn't really done anything.
I didn't
Is that
say
correct?
he doesn't not done enough on criminal justice reform. But in terms of many other things, I give him credit where credit is due. But I believe that we should expect our president and expect our politicians, our leaders, to do what they're supposed to do instead of applauding them, saying, "Hey, great, and you know what? We're going to turn a blind eye to all the terrible things you're doing." You know, how have we let them lower our
You know,
standards?
in the beginning, I was also thinking, is it really the solution at this point? But you know, after 3 years or 4 years since he was elected, I got this information coming from. I know that you'll shoot me again when it comes to where did you get that information? Okay, but the thing I don't have there. At least not that I trust, but again the question of which agency. Okay, which one really gives us the right information? So at this point, I usually go to the PNP statistics and also to the National Statistics Office. Okay, I got the information from there. And here it says that at least at this point, you know what triggered me? Precisely because of the Isko Moreno's 35-35. Okay, 35 unharmed and 35 arrested and unharmed. Okay, and alive. Okay. So what happened was that I was comparing it with the one coming from, the one that was done by Duterte. And the statistics here says that 1.6 million users or pushers surrendered alive and unharmed. And then 193,000 drug personalities arrested alive and unharmed, and 2.38 minors rescued in drug war for the first 3 years of Duterte versus 956 in previous administration. What I'm trying to say is, it's true, it came from the government, it came from the government agencies. But the thing is, based on these numbers, it seems, not just it seems, okay, again, qualifiably, that there really is an improvement. And what they noticed is that because of what they call this threat, that you will be imprisoned or you will be killed, I'm not justifying it, now the crime also lessened. You see the effect there? There is that threat that something will happen to you, whether it is true or not, and I have no idea at this point. But the thing is, corollary to that threat is the idea that because people are afraid, then they also are not able or afraid to do something like other forms of crime.
Yeah, that's what the criminal justice system should do, no? It shouldn't be, okay, if you do something wrong, I'm going to shoot you. I mean, the problem with these watch lists is that, you're right, finding sources of information, we should find it through places that are transparent, clear with their accountability, and we understand what their standards are for coming up with this information in numbers. Going into the communities, I talked to people who said, "Oh, you know what? I surrendered. I put myself on the drug watch list, or I surrendered in my community because I thought they would give me handouts. I thought maybe they would help me with my drinking addiction." I met parents, who said, "I regret putting my kids, my son, on the watch list to scare him straight because he partied too much." And the PNP was not transparent with these watch lists, and in many cases the watch lists mirrored the kill lists.
Miguel, just sorry for saying something, for cutting you.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Two things. Look, in my business ethics, I usually, there's this theory about the first generation problem. If something radical is going to be done, you want to have a change, then it is necessary even that some people are going to be affected. Again, I'm into the preservation of life, but in this case, if you need something to change, then lives would actually be lost.
Yeah.
That is in the theory of the first generation problem, business ethics. And of course, the other one is the fact that what do we really do about it if we want change? See, look for example, and I just want to ask you, even the number one cause of accidental deaths would actually be that of the car, right? I mean, car accidents. Okay, I think it's either 1 or 2 depending on the year. Okay, but the thing is, why do we allow it? Why? Precisely because the benefit, okay, outshines the negative.
I agree, but when people are
I
dying,
think we also
I take
need to
issue
be,
with that.
Sure, I'm with you with regards
Yeah.
to that. That is the reason why I discussed earlier about opportunities,
Yeah.
the giving opportunities.
Yeah.
But we also have to be very practical that when you want to change a system, something or somebody will be affected to that. I'm not against saying that because all lives, okay, life is important. But in all practicality, it will, for me, it will happen.
But why is it always the poorest and the most vulnerable? Why is it, my problem with Duterte is that I saw him as a disruptor, but he turned out not to be really a disruptor because it's status quo in Congress, in the Supreme Court, and all of these different things. You know, his friends are there entering corruption. He said, I will not condone a whiff of corruption. They're entering politics, they're becoming corrupt, and what does he do? He fires them and then reappoints them elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, I don't see him as that big a disruptor at all, actually.
Although
And
for me, the
refereeing,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. Sorry, I know that this is going to be a very long discussion because it's such a complicated problem. Let me just, you want to
true,
say
yeah.
a final thing on the war on drugs?
Right, I think the state framing of drug problems also matter. I mean, I think the state needs to realize that these are complex problems that require more comprehensive,
Yeah.
inclusive type of policies. I mean, criminal justice reform is one thing, but you have to link it with economic incentives as well, plus the institutional reforms that are necessary, like rehabilitation programs, for example. Again, a lot of rights groups are saying people end up returning to drug use, right, when there's no economic opportunities available. Some actually have the opportunity to migrate, but others stay. It's the next best thing, right?
Yeah.
We always have to bring this national discourse on a street level if we actually want to make sure that we produce real domestic reforms that actually work for people.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
the other issue here is that when I agree with Duterte that we need to address this, because if we want to bring in more domestic investments, you need to maintain domestic security actually in a given country. Now, the issue is that when you overly prioritize in that particular issue, you sideline other issues, like economic opportunities. More and more OFWs are migrating because the standard of living, traffic problems. I was just there 2 weeks ago. I was really, really upset. I couldn't even do my work, partly because of that. So sidelining these issues actually need to be addressed. And you know what? There are actually existing promising models that are actually working right now. Take a look at Portugal and Vietnam. In Portugal, for example, they have this policy called the 3-person committee, where within the local village, a local committee, this committee actually decides if you're caught using drugs, whether you need treatment or you need to be sanctioned or receive economic penalties. And over the past 10 years, Portugal has been able to see massive results. Deaths related to drug use actually have decreased, and use of drug rates actually have also dropped. And it worked. And in the case of Vietnam, for example, they've done a pilot study where they use and tested 965 opiate users, and they implemented a methadone maintenance therapy. It worked because 85% of these users ended up not using it, so they stopped. And it was so successful that 5 years later, the Vietnamese government reimposed it and nationalized the project and created 162 clinics with 32,000 patients actually across Vietnam. Now, these localized harm reduction framework actually did work, right? I'm not saying they would work directly in the Philippines, but I think we need to really look at other measures that are actually working outside. We need to increase and reform our criminal justice reform system. We need our economic incentives, but at the same time, why don't we also creatively look at how other countries are doing it? I'm not here to impose the burden shifting or burden, blaming aspects of the debate on this particular issue. But I do think that, we as a nation, we need to creatively exhaust, all these possible measures. We have a fabulous Department of Health. We have scholars, we have policymakers, we have thinkers in the Philippines. Have we really exhausted, right? These Filipinos who study both in the Philippines and outside, right? We have these people, and I think we need to maximize them.
Yes.
And I think,
Roland, just
go ahead, please.
Just one thing. Please, let's not forget that we have a very colorful political system. Okay, and certain groups and certain agencies, certain people can manipulate facts. Okay, here is a fact, and then you put a spin to it. Okay, and if you're an enemy of a particular party, then you spend so much money to it just to make sure that your interest is put forward out there.
I agree, yeah.
See,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is, even if we say something, okay, solutions to this, we also have to understand that we have certain people who are going to safeguard their own interests.
course, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We have the oligarchs, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So no matter how good your intention is, and this is where I'm going, if the reason why I like Duterte is precisely because I would like to think that he is the only person at this time, okay, as the president of the Philippines, who has the courage and the heart to put forward the core problems, to solve the core problems, at least generally, okay, of the government.
Which are what?
Well, corruption.
Has he
Precisely.
done with that?
Yeah, I have the
Because
basically the
According to all of the indices, that we're actually dropping in terms of corruption.
I have the facts here. For example, you have the facts again. You will say that you have to qualify it, but as I always say, you know, I'm trusting still the government agencies because I believe Duterte not to be corrupt. People around him can be corrupt, may be corrupt, and probably are corrupt.
Yeah.
But again, where do
So
I
why
get the
doesn't he fix
information?
that?
For example, which he is doing.
Yeah.
So here, for example, you have 200. This is basically from, from Philippine Daily Inquirer. You have 2,528 cops dismissed, 4,511 cops suspended, and then he fired hundreds of alleged corrupt officials, including his friends and supporters. Now, of course, what will happen here is that he would appoint other people, and the thing is, even if that person, even our president is not corrupt, the appointing other people would actually just, we don't know if that person is also going to be corrupt or
Yeah.
not.
But some of them were appointed to other positions, those who were fired. That's the thing.
If I may, this is the simpleng taong bayan comment, you know, watching the sauna, and he made such a, you know, an emphatic stance against corruption, and he was saying, pag may nakita kayo na corrupt, sampalin niyo siya. I mean, you've seen that, you know, don't stand for it. And yet, in front of him, sitting, were some of the most corrupt people in our history. And I don't understand, and full disclosure, I voted for Duterte, but this really concerns me. How is this happening on his watch? We have all the corrupt people out there. The case against the Marcoses, you know, just got overturned by the Sandigan Bayan. That was just, I think, released yesterday in the news. So how do you, how do we think about this? How do we look into this?
Well, and you see, this is probably misaligned, but in my class, being a teacher, what I do as a strategy is this. I have a student who's very annoying, okay? I have a student who's a bully. What I usually do, okay, to somehow form the character of the student is to assign him to a certain task, okay? And more often, students of this character, they change because now they have responsibility. What I'm trying to say is, I believe that generally, again, that people can change. That's the reason also why I'm against death penalty, okay? Because they're curtailing the growth of that person. But in this case, in this scenario, which I was telling earlier, okay, you have a student, I give him a certain responsibility, and he became responsible. Now, analogous to that, for example, you have Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo and the other leaders perceived to be corrupt, or probably
Perceived?
okay.
What do
Decided
you
by
think,
the
guys?
court to be corrupt. That's the
Perceived to be
reason why.
corrupt or
Okay.
what?
No, I'm not that I'm being naive, but okay.
We really
okay.
need San Miguel now.
What I'm trying to say is, I would like to, I don't know the strategy of Duterte, but you also have to understand that the likes of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, he's a very good economist, an excellent one. And probably, you know, I don't know, I'm looking, I'm putting words into Duterte's mouth, but he might actually be able, he might see something that we don't see as a form of strategy. He's a good tactician. I don't know. Probably we'll see some other day. I don't know. But I'm giving him that kind of a benefit of the doubt precisely because so far, of all the leaders I've experienced, okay, I've seen, it is only Duterte who actually came up with certain changes. I mean, changes that affected even the different levels of our society. And that is why I don't want to say something when it comes to corruption, when it comes to, because I know for a fact that he is not. I mean, I've been in conversation of the son, and the son confided to me many things about the family, okay, which in confidence.
Again, sharing this with the general public out there, Rex is a very good friend of Baste, so he's privy to certain things.
Yeah, and
You
he-
and some banded together.
Yeah, since I'm with that together. When I was involved there, so I would usually go to my office.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, if you're faking it, okay, it's very hard to fake it for many years until now, since he was in high school. So I'm private about certain matters regarding his family, and there's a certain consistency in terms of the honesty of the intention of the family, except probably one or two. Okay, I'm not gonna say it at this point. But what I'm trying to say is,
but the rest are okay, so it's okay.
with
The one or two
regards
is
to
okay.
Duterte, the father, okay, this much I can say, he's a very honest person. The intention is there. I do not know about the people around him. So what I'm trying to say here again is that whatever strategy is, I may not know it at this time, but I'm giving him that kind of benefit of the doubt that later on something good or something better will come out.
I think when you look at drug problems in the Philippines, you have to look at them too across time and space, right?
Precisely.
It's been 3 years, and more governments, more and more presidents, will take on this responsibility. Some will actually accelerate these issues. Some won't even prioritize them. And in the case of Duterte, again, there's a convergence of opinion here that we actually support, right? The need to eliminate that or even contain it, right? It's very difficult. Now,
Eliminate's a good word.
eliminate. But, from a diplomatic standpoint, I was like, okay, contain, right? Now, those models that I've mentioned, those localized harm reduction frameworks in Portugal, in Vietnam. The only question I keep asking myself is, have we creatively or strategically exhausted?
We're trying.
Under the existing systems that we have.
Yeah.
And I know there's issue of politicized statistics, politicized numbers, right? Politicians use it to secure their national interests, whatever those are. But at the same time, we should continue to have that faith in these institutions, I think whatever happens, institutions matter, incentives matter, and you really have to go back, right, to the link between these legal reforms and these economic incentives that are out there. Again, Filipinos are struggling. Filipinos don't have jobs. The next best thing that you have is actually jobs. And if you don't have that, then what are you gonna do? I mean, I live in Pampanga. I see a lot of these kids. It's let's just buy drugs. Let's just sell drugs.
Well,
It's quite a
there are new jobs in the Philippines. They're going to Chinese. But
That's sarcasm, right?
no, it's a fact. Actually, it's a fact. 100,000 Chinese people have come to this. But you're absolutely right. And the institutions are trying. We are trying.
Right.
Philippine institutions. Those things that you mentioned in terms of the community-based responses. Harm reduction. Duterte said that's a bad word. He doesn't even want to talk about harm reduction. He'd rather just shoot people. But harm reduction has been seen to work in countries all over the world and also in the Philippines. Actually, it was Aquino. I mean, I was not a supporter of him whatsoever, but credit where credit is due. Aquino administration implemented the municipal anti-drug advisory councils, which were meant to create rehabilitation initiatives and also weed out, who needs intensive care and who needs outpatient care, and that sort of stuff. And, credit where credit is due. Duterte and his focus on drugs really did fast track what these anti-drug councils are doing in the municipal level, the community level. But you're absolutely right. It is a huge issue.
It's a huge
and
issue.
What I hate is I would rather get together with all of you and talk about the policies and talk about the issues and talk about, instead of anti-Duterte, pro-Duterte.
Exactly.
Why are we even talking about Duterte?
Exactly.
The guy, in 2 years he's going to be laos na, and we're going to be talking
It's
about
how to
somebody
improve.
else.
And we've
It's how we
already
can
agreed,
improve the
even
situation,
even the president himself admitted that it did not work.
That is
Right. It did not work.
Exactly.
And it
Yeah.
has become worsened. I think the question here is, what do we do next, right? Because from a macro level perspective, there's a link between economic development and less use of drugs,
Yeah.
right? If you have economic prospects, economic opportunity, people will be buying and selling drugs out there. They would look for opportunities.
Exactly.
If you don't have that, then what do you do for these people?
All
We have
right.
120 million Filipinos, and if you look at our fertility rate, it's still increasing. So if you have this rampant poverty, the propensity
caught
for
my
a lot of
attention.
these people to continue to use it. So I think we really need to tackle this
Yeah.
and really bring in more generational perspectives that are really, really essential here.
And we'll cut it at that, Froilan. I know we still have a lot to say about these things. I hope you guys are listening. I know that we have a lot of friends in government. I hope you guys are listening too, because the whole point of this discussion is to get these different angles so that you can consider different things that you might not have considered yet. And yeah, we'll hear from the community right now and see what they have to say about the issues.
I am neither pro nor anti-Duterte. I am pro-Philippines. I am for whom or what we lead for our country to further greatness. Duterte's personality has been divisive, but as a leader, I have faith that he only has the best interests of Filipinos in mind. In his latest SONA regarding death penalty, I trust that our government will practice all due diligence before passing this as law para ma-measure natin ang impact nito sa government. One important question is capital punishment indeed effective in deterring crime? We can benchmark other countries. If it is, then it's something that we should all seriously consider. Lastly, I would wish that the government continue its drive to make the Philippines free of corruption, and that in the end, it is going to be a society also free of addiction that ruins family life. The government is in the right direction.
With the limited time given to me for this video, and me being a devout Catholic, I'll only tackle one of my deepest concerns, the EJ case, or killing of God's people. When confronted by media on his regime's ruthless ways, he'd say killings are not state-sponsored. Huh? Duterte, haven't you heard of the metaphor that says, your wish is my command? Studies have also shown that irresponsible rhetoric can cause widespread hate or even killing. This is a new study made in the US after the deadly shootings recently, and that's happening in the Philippines, wherein vigilantes have become more daring by killing people whom they dislike. Duterte's words made this. Recently, the PNP chief says that there's no need of a written order for him to close down the PCSO. There you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. When Duterte says something like, go kill, the police will do it even without a written order. Hence, it is state-sponsored. Duterte has openly stated that he's given immunity to the police if they kill in line of duty. After a multitude of denials to EJK, with over 20,000 killed, how many successful investigations were done? Nothing, except perhaps for the late Kian, bless his soul, because it was sensationalized. Everyone hates drugs, including me, but arbitrary killing is not the solution. Look at Mayor Isko's recent apprehension of the 35 drug addicts. No guns were fired, no one was killed, so it can be done. Based on the rule of law, everyone is deemed innocent until proven guilty. You should also have the police trained on the rules of engagement, so if shooting is required, shoot to maim, not to overkill. And where are the promised body counts for the police force? Are they scared to be identified? Sadly, our nation is the last bastion of Christianity in Asia, but Filipinos have allowed the Pied Piper to woo them. I now call these Filipinos Sunday Christians because they worship God, but also applaud every time Duterte blasphemes, curses God, and murders his people. Duterte, since you want to follow Marcos' footsteps, call for a snap election so another president can fight the drugs the righteous way.
When President Duterte delivered his SONA, the words that struck me most were, "The enemy is us. We are our own tormentors. We should not be passive in seeing things happen before our very eyes. We need to take a stand in preventing unpleasant things called corruption and abuse of authority. We should lobby. We should talk to our government officials. We should be heard. We should stand up. Look what's happening in Hong Kong right now. I just hope it will not turn out ugly and violent on both sides. We are in the Middle East. What can we do? We can speak up, stand up by using mainstream and social media, which will amplify what we really want, and we want change, peaceful and positive change, because we should think of our future, our children's future. So everyone, myself and you, we can have a voice, stand up, speak up, and really assert our rights.
Well, I am a supporter of the Duterte administration. Over the past 3 years or so, the government has been very aggressive on its war on drugs. Why shouldn't they? Drug is a menace to the society. Was it effective? Yes. The streets are more safer for you and your family. EJK human rights, well, it's maybe a bit overrated and sensationalized by the media, or rather overemphasized on the death polls rather than the extra efforts of our government regarding or related to drug rehabilitation. For the President Sona, I'd give him a 9 out of 10. His aim and commitment to the Filipinos is very clear and direct. In fact, it shows on his very high approval rating. Well, he talked about the government's continuing efforts to crack down drugs, corruption, ending communist violence, solve traffic to decrease poverty, improve telecommunications, education also, and of course rehabilitation of our tourist spots in the Philippines, and many, many more. And my favorite part, of course, is the protection for the OFW. Well, every day I am becoming a fan of the president because I see a working president that is close to the heart of the masses.
That's a huge difference. Right, guys, if you just joined us now, thank you for joining Illustrado Dialogue, and we're into the thick of things right now. We've got some comments. There's a comment from Ron Awa. If the present government is intended to provide real public service, then I will support them wholeheartedly, but no, they are corrupt and affect their real intentions to serve people. Mayor Isko is doing the opposite, and he will change Manila for the next 10 years.
Can I say something about it?
Yes, please.
I think to say that they are all corrupt is a fallacy of generalization. I think in logic, that's hasty generalization or dicta simplicita, which is basically means you're
Exactly.
overly simplifying it.
Yeah.
Okay, and for me to say that they are all corrupt, it's a fallacy for me because they are not all corrupt.
No, you're right.
Yeah, they're not all corrupt. It's simple
Yeah,
logic. when
in
it
the
comes to
same
that.
way that the government right now, it's not all bad and it's not all good,
Precisely,
right?
precisely.
Black and white doesn't exist. It's all gray areas. There's a question from Chris Daimon. He says, if you say that press freedom is under attack, why can you still continue to write highly critical pieces on the president and his administration? What is your opinion? Because I think this came out of that piece of news that said, what was the percentage?
The 18%.
18% of people said that they don't feel like they have freedom of speech, right? Miguel,
Yeah.
you're a journalist. How do you feel about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm also the only, I guess, branded Duterte critic here at this table right now.
I like
because
that, branded Duterte critic.
Because
yeah.
all the others were afraid that they would be trolled and attacked and threatened. I've received death threats. I've received, threats of violence. I was told that if I went to Davao, I would be stabbed. All of these different things. I never let any of it scare me. I'm not really afraid of that sort of stuff. But other people are, and they have a lot more. I'm reckless, and yeah. So anyway, why can I say things? Yeah, I can say things, but I really believe that Duterte is part of a new form of authoritarian leader that we're seeing all over the world. And these leaders have learned from history. They know that if they declared a dictatorship, the world and the citizens wouldn't stand for it. So what they've done is they've hijacked democracy, and they've made it so that they can get away with everything they want, stopping short of a real authoritarian government. And so, yes, we have the freedom, but it's number one, it gets drowned out. So we no longer have the censorship that we had under the Marcoses, where the Marcos administration, the regime, the dictatorship would take over different media outlets, right, and would jail opposition voices. That being said, you have opposition senators and opposition figures who are being jailed under Duterte, who are being attacked. You have environmentalists who are being shot on the streets. Human rights advocates being shot in the streets. So yeah, there is this fear of being able to speak out. Just today, I think it was, an environmentalist who was working with the Ifugao was shot outside his home, right? Because he was opposing mining and opposing environmental degradation. So I mean, that stuff, that will shut you up, I think, or those are intentions to silence you. And so, yeah, I mean, I can say what I want within reason because I'm just writing for this English language newspaper. But, as soon as you really piss them off, then they'll go and shut you up. Or what they're doing nowadays, what we're seeing is that instead of shutting you up, they will talk over you. They will drown you out. The trolls will come and they will try to discredit you. They will try to destroy you. They will drown you out. So, instead of actually shutting you up, they're just shouting louder. And so that's what we're facing all over the world, not just in the Philippines.
I see the look of concern on your face, Rex, please.
No, I like what he said about within reason. Okay, but look, let me digress. In Plato's Republic, okay, the Greek philosopher Plato, he wrote a book, The Republic, and he mentioned, this is just an idea that I want to put forward. He mentioned in his Republic that a democratic form of government is not a good government. Okay, for the simple reason that it is prone to corruption. Okay, that's the tendency. So he was actually advocating a sense of somehow a form of authoritarianism. But again, it's a hybrid. It's not like purely authoritarianism that devolves into just a dictatorship. It's not that kind of. But to say also that the kind of democracy that we have at this point is going to be the ideal government for that. That I would like to think, at least personally for me, is not a good system for the Filipinos.
No,
at this point.
Okay. I mean, Winston Churchill said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. And we live in the UAE. We work here for much of the year, and there is no democracy here. It is a monarchy, and it's got a lot going for it. And obviously, it's agile. They can do reforms very quickly. They can look after the citizens and people who live here. But other countries that have the similar thing, when the leaders start to become abusive, what mechanism do we have to get rid of them? Democracy is the only thing that actually guarantees that. I mean, if you look at any other authoritarian dictatorship or monarchy or whatever, when the leaders become abusive, you can only go to war with them. You can only shoot them or a revolution. Democracy is the only thing where we can have a peaceful transfer of power. And that's why I believe we really need to make it work. In the Philippines, it's not a democracy. It is literally a dictatorship of dynasties.
And democracy for who, right?
Well, supposedly for people.
For the people.
For the
Supposedly.
government, that is the condition of the people.
And press freedom, it's a case of a moral crisis, right? For the country. I mean, if you look at it, we have a very unequal society, right? So unequal, right?
And what do you think is the cause?
Well,
it's precisely probably because of the kind of condition we're
there's
in.
a lot of possible
Precisely
variables.
because of probably the abuse of democracy that we're experiencing at this time. You know how it is when I usually ask, when I keep on hearing about this is my opinion. I would like to think, and you need to respect it because it's my opinion. And I would like to think, when I read something like that or hear somebody saying that, what the hell are you saying? Not all opinions are equal. Some have a stupid opinion, some have basically well-informed opinion, and I think we need to know how to distinguish which one.
But I think what he's referring is like he's referring to advocates, environmentalists, human rights advocates, labor rights advocates. We are supposed to be constitutionally protected by that.
True.
Right? And they're being shot, right? And when you lose your right to express your political opinion in such context, then your democracy, whatever it is, however you define it, right, is in a huge national constitutional moral crisis. And I think that is the moral fiber that we have as a nation. And when you lose that, that's the part where you actually raise questions about your national identity. And that actually matters a lot.
You came up with an example about the environment. I remember this. He appointed before, put forward Gina Lopez, right? Okay, and then Gina Lopez was opposed by certain groups. Okay, and I would like to think the very fact that Duterte at that time wanted Gina Lopez to be in office to protect the environment, and I think actually he was listening to the clamor of the environmentalists, of those who are protecting nature. That is why I mentioned earlier also that our political system is so colorful, because even if your heart is in the right directions, you have other people, other agencies, the oligarchs, for example, who are very much against it to protect their own interests.
It's a very complicated puzzle
Precisely.
with
That
so
is why
many
that is
moving
why.
parts and pieces. Yeah, and we don't hope to find solutions today because we're talking about such complex issues. But what we're trying to do is just put different thoughts out there for you guys to consider and for you guys to also participate in the. In the discussion, and I would disagree with you, Rex. Everybody's opinion counts.
Of course.
So yes, of course, there are different qualities of opinions, And we encourage you to please share your opinion, but please make sure that when you're sharing your words out there that you're respectful and you are responsible, because freedom doesn't come, you don't take freedom without taking responsibility. So that's the most important thing there.
Yeah, everyone has a right to an opinion, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the opinion is right.
Exactly.
That
Yeah,
is
that's
true.
true.
That
I
is
ag-
why I
yes,
said
I
it should
agree.
be a well-informed opinion. Because
Agreed.
information is free, it's there. The
Agreed,
only reason
yeah.
we don't have information because we're lazy to read.
Yeah.
Let me generalize that.
But how do you make an
Or
informed
probably
opinion?
not
Right?
laziness. That is
Yeah.
true.
How do you inform your opinion? You go by actually going and investigating yourself.
Precisely.
Exactly,
Now, we
yeah.
live in an age where we have, citizen journalists, we have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now we're recording this great conversation with a ring light and
And a
a
mobile
cell
phone,
phone.
yeah.
That's it.
That's
That's
it.
all it is.
Yeah.
You can do that too and have these conversations, right?
Definitely.
This is super important.
That's why most people feel that this social contract between state and citizens, it's failing. That's why you see a lot of these protests, a lot of these criticisms, that you see from them on a day-to-day basis. And I do think that we need to preserve, right, whatever democratic values and ideals that we have.
We should,
It's something that we fought for more than a century.
definitely.
I think it's very, very important we do that.
People will say that...
with responsibilities as well.
Yeah, with
linked to that,
responsibility.
yeah.
People will say all you do is talk and talk and talk, right? That's all we're doing right now. But, sometimes that's all that we're left being able to do because we become so disempowered. I refuse to call the people in charge in the Philippines our leaders. They're our rulers. That's not mince words. They are our rulers. We are not led. We are ruled. And all that we have left to do, rather than talk about these things and raise our voices against it, we have nothing left. We can vote, but really, where do our votes go, right? I mean, we were so disempowered. And what I had hoped to Duterte, look, I went to for one of the projects that I had is I went to all the meeting de avance of all the different political candidates for president. And it was Duterte's that was so electrifying. And at that moment I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm with this guy. I am, not because of what he was saying. I don't care what the politicians are saying. They all say the same thing. They make the same promises. Not all of them. Some of them are good. But it was anyone who can empower the Filipinos and unite us. As much as I had doubts about him. But my issue is this, is that we are taught to be followers rather than leaders. We do not see ourselves as this. I say this to all of my students, I say this constantly. And this is, I think, one of the issues that we have, is that we're just supposed to give up our rights, give up our power to these leaders who promise that they'll change things for us. But we as teachers know also that we want our students to be able to make us obsolete. We should be dispensable, right? As a parent, you're not going to say, Duterte, Imelda Marcos, they say, oh, we're going to be the father of the nation or the mother of the nation, and we'll take care of you. A real father and mother would say, we're going to teach you how to make it and be autonomous and how to be responsible about it. The truth of the matter is that we are all leaders. We are, but nobody talks about that. None of our politicians do. We are leading our communities, we are leading our classrooms, we are leading our families, we are leading the groups that we belong to. And nobody in government is teaching us how to enter and participate and become leaders in those mechanisms of government, in the mechanisms of power. And this is my issue with Duterte and everyone who came before that. It was a very patriarchal, paternal sort of thing, or maternal in Gloria's thing. It was like, don't worry about it, just vote, shut up, let us do what we're going to do, and we will fix everything for you. We have too much democracy. You need to be disciplined.
All states want to. I just want to make a very quick point.
Okay.
All states want to develop.
Yeah.
Right. They all want to achieve economic development, economic, social, and political development, including the Philippines. Now, when you have a state that limits the power or the freedom of press, right, the democratic capacity of people to exercise their citizenry, that's when you have that issue, right? Are we incapable of being governed, right? Is democracy incompatible, right, with our values, right, as Filipinos, right? And from my experience and from the research that I've seen, it is really essential that we maintain this. I keep saying this again and again. When the state monopolizes this discourse and uses it towards the citizens, you lose that fiber, right? We've fought for this for centuries, right? We need to maintain. I don't care if journalists are saying this, but we need to maintain that discourse. You always see that critique. You always have that needed opposition, right? To help you better understand what's the to help you understand what's on the other side of the argument. You don't need to conform to that. You don't need to permit
It's
it.
essential.
But you just need to like maintain it. But the problem is that, again, especially in provinces, right, when you have family oligarchies that dominate, national politics or provincial politics, when you see somebody trying to sort of challenge a specific, provincial leader, they just shoot you. And how much is it to cost? To cost? It's like a few thousand pesos.
20,000 pesos.
20,000 pesos,
Yeah,
right?
going rate for hit.
Depends on the personality.
Our national heroes guarantee that democracy, right? That right, and we're losing that. And I do hope that for a lot of Filipinos, 120 million of us here, right, that we need to really reaffirm that it's ours and we need to take it back.
Final
No,
words
just-
before we move to the next slide.
just
I know.
that-
I can see it building and building up, Rex. Go
No,
ahead.
just a little
Yeah.
bit, and I'm going to be, just going to be short. I was just triggered by when Miguel said, and when you said that.
So I don't mean to trigger you. That's a bad word.
Now in a, but then we have something to say about the
Yeah,
tongue. Now,
He's an ex-monk.
yeah.
Oh,
Like
so
it
you can
matters.
fight.
Go
No, what
ahead,
I'm trying
Rex,
to say,
yeah.
what I'm trying to say is, I don't see that the way when you mentioned earlier that Duterte is not leading, but basically is ruling, okay? Because I would like to think that he fluctuates between leading and ruling, and I think for me that is a good indication of a leadership. Depends on the situation. There's this. I've been reading consistently that I know that it is not a good book for democracy, that of Machiavelli's The Prince, but he mentioned that a good leader should be able to put on the cloak of flexibility, either that of the lion and that of the cloak of a sheep. Okay, basically not the fox, the lion, the fox. This means to say that there are certain instances wherein you have to strong arm, depends on the situation, and then you have to be flexible enough when it has something to do with being kind, with being giving to certain situations. And I would like to think, at least this is my opinion, okay, that Duterte at this time has been flexible enough. But of course, his being authoritarian, okay, shines forth more than the other side.
Because he said he was. He said, I'm a dictator.
But that is true. That is
His
true
own
in
words.
the sense that, okay, that is, look, even that, and I would like to say this, okay, having stayed in Cagayan de Oro, okay, for 5 years, I noticed because of the close proximity to Davao, what happens is that if you constantly pick on the way that Duterte says something, okay, is that you will not really know what he's saying, okay, in the sense that you don't have to be very literal in your interpretation of Duterte. And I think it will take time for people to realize that you have to go beyond what he's saying in public. I know that sometimes it borders into probably immorality.
I think
or
he's
probably
verbally
chauvinism.
challenged to his own
That is
detriment.
also true.
Yeah.
That is why the press in Davao, again, I might be mistaken, but the way I look at it, the press in Davao, they usually go beyond the words being said in public by Duterte. And I think I'm old enough to realize that what he does, okay, is not necessarily in consonance with what he says.
Which is
the issue.
Very
I mean,
difficult. Yeah.
words do
That
matter.
is true. That is
Yeah.
Words
probably
matter,
that is
but
going to
his
be his
actions do as
limitation
well.
and
That's my
shortcomings.
issue
Yeah,
with
yeah,
this.
yeah. There are a lot of those moments where I'm left scratching my
Precisely.
head because I'm like, why did you say that? Do you have to? But anyway, we'll give the air to our, community members right now. Let them share their opinions also, and yeah, we'll continue this.
I really love Duterte's administration and leadership. And what I really like most about him is he is a man of action and remarkable results and achievements. I love his programs, his plans, and his advocacies for the people, especially for the OFWs. And it's good to know during his recent SONA about the creation of the Department of OFW to take care of the welfare of the Filipino overseas worldwide. This is really something very, very good, and it's a big wow for me. Being an OFW for 15 years here in the UAE, I've never felt this much valued before. So I'm very much thankful, and really commended this advocacy of the President. So thank you so much, Mr. President. Well done. God bless.
Hi, my name is Mayo, and I'm an OFW based in Kuwait working as a security specialist in a military camp. I totally oppose the admin of the former mayor of Davao. Corruption is so rampant in the government. An example is a recently elected Senator Bong Revilla, who was cleared of plenary case involving the pork barrel scam. Cleared, but he is required to pay the money back, and his chief of staff found guilty? Good golly gracious. Also, the Tulfo siblings at Tourism, Soljan Kalida's garnering contract from the government, same thing with Bongo and his construction company. Don't forget Arroyo, Marcoses, and Estradas being cleared from their cases. Our current government has to go, as they have subverted the required checks and balances in the government. COA received the ire of the President for doing their diligent duty. The judicial and legislative branches are now all answerable to the executive branch, specifically to the President. Hopefully, by 2022, we could educate the voters and turn the tide of our decaying government.
Well, there are three things that I find offensive about this Duterte administration. First of all are the extrajudicial killings that have claimed thousands of lives, and mostly these are poor people who were never given their day in court. They were just gunned down like that, and yet, despite this bloodbath, the drug problem still remains the same. It may in fact have even gotten worse. Second is our pathetic foreign policy as far as China is concerned. They have taken over our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea, and yet the government has done nothing about it, except of course for Duterte to scare us with their warmongering talk. And lastly, the government is full of deceit and half-truths. Add to that the misogynistic and offensive verbal tirades of the President, and it makes you wonder what kind of moral legacy we are trying to leave to the youth. 3 years is still a long time to go before this nightmare is finally over.
Am I a supporter or not of the sitting president? My answer is neither. I am for the welfare of the Philippines and for the Filipino people. My take on war on drugs. It is an injustice, especially to all the victims. Collateral and or wrongfully picked up, you just cannot resurrect them from death. Simply put, the value of human lives doesn't matter in this administration. Philippines foreign policy could try. Obviously, we do not have such policy if this administration keeps on nodding with their whims and caprices. What maximum they can get and be benefited while this president is in the position. Corruption. It is unlimited. Almost all politicians are in the bandwagon now. So if the leader does it, what do you expect? Particularly with the dismissal of the Marcos case today by the Sandigan Bayan, good luck Filipinas. On Sona, not interested actually, so I failed to watch it. Speech is always insignificant anyways, with all the curses expected with it. So, my scorecard? So far, the only good thing is the National Identity Card Law. Somebody told me it was approved, but I'm not sure when it will be implemented. Gun ban. A lot. Need to say more? I only have 1 minute of this. So, what I'm hoping for is a fulfillment of all his promises while he was campaigning during the election. So, that was my 1 minute talk. Thank you.
And we're back again, guys. Thank you for joining Illustrado Dialogue. And we have a hot topic right now, but the great thing is that we can really discuss it openly and nobody's angry. Not you, Rex, right?
I'm not. I'm just emotional. But
Emotional.
Just kidding.
Not really.
No, I'm passionate. The correct word is passionate.
The correct word is passionate. But thank you for being with us. Please to join us with your opinion, weigh in on the issues. I'd like to greet Luchi Sugitan, Pascal Aguian, Harvey Senit, hi, Hilarion Costello Oliver, Joel Guerrero, Eco Knife Edge, Felix de los Santos, Angel Urote, Nick Maranan, Eden Borja, Tita E, how are you doing? Gabriel John Rimando, Bryanson Ong Acalar, Ron Awa, Donald Rosales, Ogie Garcia, Rudston Estrelado, Maynard de la Cruz, Raquel Visage, Nikki Kate, Tess Manzano, Leslie Fiestan from Saudi Arabia, Matet Malit, Albert Alba, and my dad. Hi, Dad. who's a very passionate Duterte supporter. Erwin Duria is also here. Guys, let's talk about China and Duterte's foreign policy.
Why are you looking at this?
Let's talk about China. Miguel made a comment earlier that all the jobs are going to China, and you reacted, Rex. Tell us about
Not all
that.
the jobs, just 100,000
Okay.
of them.
Misinformation, me. Yeah.
No,
Go ahead, Rex.
the
Yeah.
thing is, what can we do as a country?
Yeah.
Okay, as a country, and we basically have a lack of, materials to, again, the extent is to go to war, but do we have the arms? Look at it this way. I think in, I don't know if I remember this correctly, 1951, we have a mutual defense treaty with the U.S., right? Okay, around 1950s. And what happened was, when there was a standoff in Scarborough Shoal in 2006, early 2000, okay, it was the president then was Benigno Aquino. What happened was there was a standoff, and then suddenly there was an agreement to pull the ship. But then we agreed to it, but China didn't. Okay, and we were actually asking help from the U.S. precisely because of the mutual the defense treaty. But did they do anything about it? See, I mean, to the extent of just in case we go to war.
What did we do? We actually went and filed an arbitration
Precisely,
case.
that is true, which we won, by the
Right,
way,
exactly.
which we won. That is true. But
Right.
China, let me say this again, it was to say, I don't know how to say this came in front, but was a bully, meaning to say that they did not follow
Plain and simple, yeah.
Right.
precisely the decision made by that in that case, from that case. So what happened was that now we're left here. They actually put a wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they put a wall, which was in defiance of the judgment.
So, the judgment came in the first month of the Duterte administration, actually, the arbitration. And it was up to the Duterte administration to do something with it. And Duterte went to China, got a bunch of loans, not even grants, but loans, for his Build, Build, Build initiative. And so, the Philippines was up against China under the Aquino, and even dating back towards, for years actually, through the Arroyo administration. And what did we do? We went and we sought due process, rule of law, international law. These are international waters, right? Which are being claimed. And I don't understand, though. I hear this a lot from a lot of supporters of Duterte. And, it's an opinion I respect, but why are we already thinking war? Why is it, that's the only alternative? There are many alternatives that we can do. We can pursue the upholding of the arbitration ruling. We can seek support from the other claimants within the region. We can build international support so that there is pushback against China via, complaints, sanctions, etc., etc. There are methods for us to do that, but the Duterte administration has decided not to do that because we're getting lots of money, kuno. And just today there was a report that there's a Chinese ship now surveying the waters in the other side of the Philippines, on the east, near Zambales. And what are they doing there, right? And there's nothing we can do. They hit our fishing boat, right? Leaving our fishermen to drown. And there's nothing we can do about it because automatically it's either that or war. But other countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, all these other countries, Japan, for example, are all pushing back against Chinese incursions as well, and there hasn't been war. So why is it suddenly that we are? And yet we're getting billions of pesos, and we're getting, we become the casino of China, the Philippines, and all of that sort of stuff, and troll information and technology. So there's a lot of benefit that they're getting.
Let's hear from Froilan.
Right, China is a rising superpower globally and within Southeast Asia. You cannot avoid China. You have to deal with China. So when we face these confrontations in Spratly Islands, we immediately saw, the opinion of the international community. We won, right? And under Annex 7 of the UN Convention of the Local Seas, it ruled that China has no historical rights, right, in its Spratly Islands. We won. But Duterte shifted that discourse a bit, right? And instead of aggressively forcing it, right, both nationally and internationally, they ended up negotiating and citing and using more soft power, approach towards China by taking all these loans and development aids, etc. Now, to put you in a current context, today Duterte said that there is a proposal from the Chinese government that they would, create a joint exploration, right, for oil and hydrocarbon gas that you see there. He said 40%, right? 60% for the Philippines and 40% for China. And that this MOU agreement, as you know, it's non-binding, and that China, as he argued, has delayed the signing of the codes of conduct between China and all these Southeast Asian countries. Now, there are two issues here. Well, first of all, there's an issue of power symmetry, right? We are in a very weak diplomatic position to assert ourselves. So you have two options here, right? You either take a very, unrealistic approach. You go to war, you push this and that, or you take a practical approach, which Duterte did. We know that we don't have the military capacity, financial capacity to pursue such issues. That's why we ended up taking this approach of Duterte. We're taking out loans. But the issue here is that this debt diplomacy that China uses, right? This would propel more economic dependence. Right? It's not really. Sure, it creates infrastructure, this and that, but does it really promote that needed institutional economic development in the country? So that's actually a big question, right? It creates economic independence. It happened in Sri Lanka, right? China has to take that, from Sri Lanka and a whole port. And a lot of countries in Africa as well, Southeast Asia and South Asia as well. So there's an issue of power symmetry, and that's non-binding, right? Duterte is saying we'll get 60%. If China is not recognizing that international law, then how can you expect China, a country that has already invested in military infrastructure in the Spratly Islands, to give you 60%? I mean, you have to be extremely realistic here. Do you really think China will give you 60%? I don't think so. Now, if you look at this joint cooperation, the moment you say joint cooperation, it's a concession of sovereignty, right? You are giving you're giving up some forms of your sovereignty. Now, what am I trying to say here? Well, this region is very important because 30% of global supply routes actually come from that area. There are 11 billion barrels of oil, 3 times or more of combination in the Middle East that you see. And there are 990 trillion feet of natural gas. So this actually, there's a huge stake here. China wants it, and you can't blame them. There's a lot at stake. They're using that 9-dash line, ignoring sort of that, UN convention that we have. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need that balanced approach. I agree with Duterte. It's the most practical way that we could do. We're pushing that. But I also want to caution a few things. First, we need to make sure that whatever we do diplomatically, it's in line with our constitution, right? That it does not undermine our constitutional values. And it reflects the generational interests, right, of young Filipinos, and that it doesn't undermine that international law ruling that we have. When you look at this particular case, I understand that we cannot avoid China. We have to embrace, we have to diplomatically engage. But we also cannot ignore the fact that, again, I kept saying this, our national identity, right? We've survived so many colonizations, right? And for the past 3 years, we've been challenged a lot. And the issue that you see here in China, it's the same thing that we face also in the Middle East. We are trying to sign bilateral agreements and MOUs with a lot of receiving countries in the Middle East so we could gain more labor protection for workers here. We're struggling to do that, even for domestic workers. Only recently we were able to, push some of these agreements, in the Middle East, in Qatar, in Saudi, in Kuwait. We are still struggling. We are, to an extent, under attack from different fronts, be it labor, be it issues of sovereignty in this Spratly Island. The point that I'm making here is that if we're going to get a bad deal from this 60-40, then I would suggest that the government should rethink about its position and let the next generation actually decide for that. Because if you have the president and you have these technical advisors working on this agreement, and if this deal has its generational implications, and if it doesn't really give or reflect our national interests, in a lot of ways, if it's going to create a generational cost for us, then I think they should let the next generation decide for that, as opposed to pushing a bad deal that may not work for us.
Let's try to go into, like to be rational about it. Let us say that the Chinese government doesn't give in to
And it will
our
not.
negotiation. That is true.
Right.
And I also know for a fact that based on the experiences of other countries with regards to the relationship to China, it's not, the sun really doesn't shine, doesn't come out. What I'm trying to say is, do we have an option to it? Knowing that China is a superpower, we negotiate, they don't give in, what do we do after? Because you have to understand also where Duterte is coming from based on, how he grew up. The thing is that, in fact, earlier, I was thinking, why is he not aligning with the US? See, that's the other side of it. He's embracing China, and based on what you mentioned, that the effect is not going to be really for us if they don't give in to our negotiation. And that's a question that I've been wondering about for so long. And I was looking into his life story, and that Duterte admitted it, that is basically a leftist, which is very much against democracy. So he's into socialism. And what happened here was that, in fact, he was actually educated in politics by Jo Marie Simpson. So what happened here is that he was not aligning himself with the US for the simple reason that I think he came up with an example of what happened with the killing of the 600 in Hulu, okay, by the Americans before. And every time that he's being interviewed why he's not aligning himself with the US is precisely because of that particular incident, that the Americans killed 600 or more Muslims at that time.
100 years ago.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But he keeps on saying that and saying that precisely because he was saying that how can you educate us with equality? How can you educate us with with EJK, etc. When you yourselves actually murdered 600 or to 1,000 Islam or Muslims at that time.
That doesn't seem very forward-thinking to be caught up in something that happened 100 years ago, and it's a logical fallacy. It's a to-quote fallacy. It's a whataboutism. It's like, well, you can't talk about human rights because 100 years ago you killed 600 Muslims in our country.
But that motivated him, to align to China. Again, it is also something that even that is problematic.
So with or without that agreement, China takes practically out.
That is true.
So personal
what I'm
bias
trying to say
is
here is
over.
that the Philippine state should maintain that discourse that it is ours, and it's a national sovereignty of the country, and it's a national interest of the Filipinos. If the Philippine government cannot get a good deal out of it, then I don't think it's quite a good idea, for such an administration to make such decisions for 120 million Filipinos.
Froilan, if I
if
have
it's
to ask
actually
you-
not going to give us a good deal.
Froilan,
I do agree with the Philippine government that they have to get the best deal out of it. But what I'm trying to say is that if you're not going to get a good deal out of it, regardless, that's a non-binding document. If China is not recognizing that international ruling, it's not going to give you any deal.
But Froilan, my question to that is, what if China doesn't give us a good deal?
And China
What
is not going
happens
to give you a
next?
good deal. That's the point of it.
We're not necessarily going to go straight to war. I mean,
but the
Taiwan
point is
hasn't
that
had a war with. Well, the Hong Kong protesters are able to. I mean, we can push back.
You see,
Especially-
I actually have a problem more with trust. Because we cannot trust the US, that's for sure. Recently, the war of Japan is going to be
Well, you cannot
that was
trust
a
anyone.
declaration.
Exactly, you
that
can't
was a
trust
declaration.
anybody.
That was a declaration of the US saying that the war of Japan is going to be our war also. But they don't do that. They don't declare that in their relation to the Philippines.
But isn't that the basic rule of international relations, though? There are no permanent friendships but permanent interests, right? Your permanent interests, national interests really determine
True.
your level of engagement. But what I'm trying to say here is that in the case of China, with or without that MOU, China has already built that infrastructure. With the Philippine consent or not, they will take it. And the fact that he's saying 60%, if it actually works, alhamdulillah, great.
If it
But
doesn't
in reality,
work,
and it's not going to work. And what I'm saying is that give the next generation the chance, that discourse, that at least once at least at this point in time, that the state retained its position that it is ours.
for me, give the next generation a chance is a motherhood statement.
No, it's not a motherhood statement at
Well,
all.
for the simple reason
Because you're
that-
relying
how?
on senior level technical
When you say-
advisors here.
when you say that, how do you give a chance to anything practicable to it? Anything substantial to it?
Look,
give the next generation a chance.
Let me give you more
There are so many
practical
chances
examples
that
here. There's an upcoming administration here, right? And they have diverse opinions as far as like how to deal with China. Remember, what I'm trying to say here is that we need to retain our discourse. We are already weak. We know that militarily, economically, and institutionally. We need to be really firm that this is ours and that we need to get the best deal out of it. It's very difficult. I understand. I also don't have solutions for it. But what I'm trying to say here is that we need to maintain that discourse. It's really, really essential. I mean, we've again fought many of these colonizations and even these struggles from outside. We claim our territory. This is ours, and we need to really fight for it.
Yeah.
In fact,
So if you have two properties, right? If I have, and my neighbor comes and starts building on my property, what do I do? Is it directly war? Am I going to get my gun and shoot him? No, of course not. I'm going to go to the authorities. I'm going to launch a petition. I'm going to take him to court. I'm going to do all these things.
yeah, which we did.
Right, which
which we
Duterte
did.
decided, oh great, first month of my administration, I'm going to take this and I'm going
And
to
what was
throw
the
it away.
reason? What was the reason for that decision? Precisely because the China wouldn't budge.
And it will not.
Yeah, wouldn't budge. I think I know what you're saying. China just wouldn't
Is that the
budge.
reason why?
We already went
Or
to
is
the
it
international
because-
court for it. We even won. We even
Yeah,
won.
or is it because
So what do you-
Duterte got a lot of money and a lot of support from the
that
Chinese?
is not a
See?
fact
It-
at this point. At this point,
What do you
okay?
mean?
It's
It's not a fact?
A fact in the sense that this money is it for self-interest?
No, these are loans
Precise-
to fund his build.
Precisely. And
But
I
at the
think
same
there's a
time, he's
difference
saying,
to that.
okay, well, EU, fuck you, US, UN. I mean, he literally said, fuck you, UN, right? Instead of taking their grants and their support, I'm going to throw everything that I need